This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gold.
Welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. Guys, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. As always, I really appreciate it. I appreciate all the returning fans, and I appreciate the people that have recently found the show and are ripping through the back catalog of these incredible stories of the men and women of law enforcement that go out there every day and they do this completely and totally insane job. I'm talking about the deputy sheriff or small town cop that has a big patrol area with a small population, down to the city cop that's got a small patrol area with a giant population, and all the federal agents out there and everybody else, the state troopers, everybody that does this job. They're all a little bit different, but they're also all very similar, dealing with the same clientele often in our jobs. It is, as a police officer I've been in law enforcement 17 years, and you never know what to expect. You never know what people are going to do, and you never know what you're going to see when you go to shift. You could have a quiet shift that's nice, and you sign off totally unmolested and go home peacefully, or you could be held over for an unnamed amount of hours dealing with some ridiculousness. And a lot of times you see it and you're like, oh my gosh, I wish people could see this real time, because this situation is totally insane. And I guarantee you the residents and the people who live around this area would be completely shocked at how totally nuts this situation is. So I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're listening. I'm glad you're interested in the profession. I'm very glad if you're listening and you're interested in becoming a law enforcement officer on any level at all, because we need good people. We need good men and women to do this job, to hold the line, to enforce laws, and basically make people pay for doing wrong. You know, that's what it's all about. There has to be enforcement. There has to be rule of law for this society to continue. And we see what happens currently right now in real time when it's not enforced. And what happens when we don't enforce the rule of law. We let things slide. We let people slide because of feelings or past transgressions or whatever you want to call it. Things just get worse. That's not how it works. So these are the men and women that do this job, and thank God for them. I thank God for them every day, and you should too. So the guest today is another very, very experienced law enforcement officer, special agent with the DEA. He was assigned to Islamabad, Pakistan, part of a team that captured the 1993 NYC World Trade Center bombing mastermind, Ramzi Yousef. Also, he's a retired Army CID agent. 40 total years of active and reserve service. Also deployed at 58 years old to Kabul, Afghanistan, to assess the rule of law counterinsurgent strategy for the J2 section of the Special Operations Command, Europe. He retired a DEA supervisory special agent and has written 3 criminal justice textbooks, and then now has dipped his toes into a debut novel, Stinger, an international thriller, and we'll tell you all about where you can get that. Without further ado, let me bring on Greg Lee. Sir, welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, sir. It's an honor to have you, and like we said before we spoke, Mr. Lee here was very accommodating with my ridiculous schedule, so we're starting a little bit late, but I thank you, sir.
No problem.
Excellent. So you started as DEA agent. Before that, were you ever a reserve cop, a special police officer, or a policeman anywhere?
Well, I go all the way back to 1970 when I became a law enforcement explorer for the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department.
Wow.
It was a brand new concept. Try to get kids interested in maybe a law enforcement career.
Yep.
and let them get some hands-on experience by being a ride-along. And they put you through a weekend, like maybe 6 weekends at the academy, and it was quite an experience for a 17-year-old kid to
Sure.
learn from these guys have been around a while. And then when you get to an assignment to one of the substations, and you get to ride along, and you're wearing a uniform, and half the people mistake you as being another deputy, when of course you're not. But the whole purpose was for you to gain hands-on experience to see how the deputies handled situations that came up. And back in the 70s in LA County, I mean, the sky was the limit. I mean, we saw everything you could imagine, from drive-by shootings to family disturbances and neighbor quarrels and barking
Yeah.
dogs and everything you could imagine. So it was quite an education for me, and I really learned a lot from it, and appreciated the opportunity to engage in it.
Yeah, I heard working at LAPD, I heard that back in the day, people were exceptionally bummed out when the sheriff showed up because they would undoubtedly stomp a hole in your ass.
Well, there was some severe ass kicking going on in my presence, and I was like, ooh, baby, But I was hooked when, there was no doubt that this is what I wanted to do. And I never dreamed about being a DEA agent or federal agent of any sort. I had, I graduated from high school, so I'm 18. I'm waiting, killing time till I'm 21 so I can apply for the job. And in the meantime, the draft lottery numbers came out in 1972, and my birthday came out as number one. So that was a life-changing event for me. So there was no question what was going to happen. So Vietnam's still going on. I'm about to be drafted. I thought, well, I might as well just enlist and do the job I want, as opposed to getting drafted and to be a bedpan collector at Saigon Hospital or something like that.
Yeah, my dad did the exact same thing.
So I enlisted, became an MP, and the day I graduated from MP school, they signed the Paris Peace Accords, and President Nixon ended the draft all at the same time. But they did draft up to, I think, number 22 that year. So I was done no matter what. So I might as well make the best of it. So my first real, where I'm now the authority of sort as an MP, was at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And we had there's all kinds of stuff going on. The Army was riddled with jerks and former criminals, and I met people at basic training. Uh, they said that, well, I said, well, what are you doing here? And he says, well, the judge gave me the option of joining the Army or going to prison.
Wow.
Really? And there were a lot of them. And he says, yeah, as soon as I pled guilty, there was a recruiter at the back of the courtroom.
Oh,
He signed him
jeez.
right up. And that's the quality of soldier you had at the time.
Yeah.
And then there was big drug usage. It was a mess. It was like, you look at it like, how in the hell can the Army wage a war? They can't keep their own people intact. So
Wow.
all that changed when somebody came up with the brilliant idea of having periodic urinalysis done. And Vietnam was over. There's nothing going on for a while, and this was the time to rid the Army of these people. And they got rid of a whole bunch. And they stopped taking people who didn't have high school education. Anybody came positive on the piss test was gone. I mean, you're gone. Pack your stuff. You're out of here.
Yeah.
And then they started, and then the end of the draft, of course, and they started getting a very high quality recruit. And after 40 years in the Army, believe me, I've seen everything you can imagine, from the way it was in the 70s to the way it was and is now, which is really a stellar force with a lot of stellar people in it. And they've rid themselves of all these misfits and all that that was going on at the time. So it builds a better quality army that you have. So that worked out fine for me.
Yeah, that's interesting. My dad was same thing. He was a Cape Codder during Vietnam. So, he grew up on boats, family of sea captains, the whole thing. And his number was coming up, so he joined the Navy. He said, I might as well join where I want to join. So I'm good with boats. I'm nautical. I'll do that. And he said in boot camp, he said it was like they were low on DIs. So he said they had these huge platoons of guys and not enough drill instructors. So he said a bunch of times I was so tired from the brief boot camp we went through that he goes, I used to fall asleep on my feet, and they would do an about face, and I would open my eyes and everybody was facing me, and I'd have to spin around real quick. And I said, well, damn, they must have been all over you. And he's like, no, nobody saw because there was no DIs there. They were just trying to get so many people through, just for the war. So it sounds like they were taking all comers during that.
Oh man, when I went to basic training, one of the DIs, he was a Sergeant E5, a buck sergeant, and he was one of these join the army or go to jail candidates. And they didn't play any games back then. If somebody didn't have the right attitude or he didn't want to go along with the program, they took him to the other end of the other side of the barracks and beat the hell out of him.
Yeah.
Oh man, that would never happen now. Now it's completely
yeah
different. And I think it's ridiculous how they've made it now. I think you have a red card or a blue card. You're saying, hey,
I know.
I need timeout. No, you don't. You need get your ass in shape. Let's do it.
Yeah.
But anyway, the pendulum swings. The way it does. So I don't know where we are now, but it wasn't a bad experience for me. I enjoyed it up to the end.
Yeah, you had a little hands-on correction, as they call it.
Oh, man.
The
you go to the stockade now if you put your hands on a recruit like that. But
yeah, I know. I was friends with a longshoreman in New Brunswick, Canada, and he was a supervisor at the port in St. John. And a good friend of his made it up really high in the military. So they decided in Canada, like 20 years ago, that they were going to send Canadian military personnel to Paris Island to see just why it is that the Marines are so efficient and what Canada can do to get on the same page with the U.S. Marines, right? So he said his buddy came back and he was like, all the admin, all the upper echelons witnessed Paris Island for 2 weeks, and they said, we could never subject Canadian citizens to what they do to U.S. military members. He said, no wonder they're killing everybody. He goes, they treat them terribly. I'm like, well, yeah, in Canada, the U.S. Navy boats have brass rail bars on them, and they bring girls back, when they're in port to drink. It's like, yeah, it sounds great, but it's not great. It's not very efficient for killing folks. So I always thought that was an amazing story. I'm like, wow. Well, at least they know they're not willing to do it. They'll just let us do it, I guess.
Sure.
Greg, can you get into the investigation that led to the capture of the suspect for the 1993 bombings? How did that go down, and what was your part in it?
Well, let me back up a little bit. After I was an MP for a while, I became a CID agent. And I did 8 years of active duty, left as a CID agent. I wanted, at that point, I had a master's degree, so I thought I was pretty ripe for the feds. And nobody was hiring at the time. This is like 1980 when I was ready to get out. And so I went to the Salinas Police Department in Monterey County, California. I'd been at Fort Ord prior to that, and did my probation period there. Then my wife got a job offer in Los Angeles. We couldn't pass that up, so she took the job. I went to the Pasadena Police Department. I spent 2.5 years there, and that was I really enjoyed patrol. That was good because when you're done at the end of the day, you're done.
Right.
You don't come back with with a caseload, and the cases are so old. They bark at you when you come back into the office. It's like, God, say it over and over again.
You got
So,
detectives that take over the major investigations. You just go back and patrol.
well, I didn't have that option as a CID agent, but either way, I was working one day in Pasadena, and my partner, who was a brand new probationer, she was dating an FBI agent, and said that the DEA had 400 openings. Oh, from
Wow.
0 to 400. So I think DEA had a total number of 1,100 sworn, and Reagan wanted to expand it to at least 1,500. So I immediately called the recruiter, and 6 months later, I'm on the job as a DEA agent. They
Wow.
did the whole background interview, everything. So I spent my first 5 years in Los Angeles. I came up to Monterey County for 3 years to open an office here. Then went to Quantico, where I was an instructor for 3.5 years. And after 3 years, the boss comes out and says, "Hey, time's up for all you guys. You go find a home somewhere. You got to go back out in the field." Okay, that makes sense. So I'm looking around, and now in the meantime, my wife becomes a DEA intelligence analyst. So now she was thinking, it'd be nice if we could go overseas. Yeah, well, let's see. It gets really kind of, you can't be too picky when you got a tandem couple. But there were several openings in Mexico and Peru, I think. And one of the slots was already taken up because the the agent was married to a CIA agent or something. So that was
Okay.
gone. And then they came out and they said, well, guess what? Uh, there's a tandem couple opening in Islamabad, Pakistan. I didn't think too much about Pakistan. I didn't know nothing about Pakistan.
Don't really want to
But
see those sites.
but it was English speaking, so I didn't have to deal with language school and all that stuff. So
Right.
we took it. So we took it and showed up, and the first 6 months were not bad. There's not a lot of heavy lifting going on. Our job there mostly is to gather drug intelligence and stuff like that, and then so the embassy was real nice. We got along with all the other Western diplomats, and everything's fine. And then one day, I get to work. It's about 8:30 in the morning, and my boss calls me into his office, and in there is the regional security officer. His job is for the security of the embassy and all the personnel there. And he's there with his two special agent assistants, which are all part of the diplomatic security service. And I knew something's up because we could tell the two diplomatic security guys were running around the embassy the whole week before, and you couldn't get their attention. And you'd say, "Hey, Jeff, let's go to lunch." "Oh, I'm busy. I got to go." And it was highly unusual for them to be acting that way. So I was concerned that there was some kind of security threat against the embassy, and he wasn't fessing up to it. And so now I go into the boss's office, and they are, as well as their boss, and they said, "Well, guess what? Last week we had a woman who called us because some Pakistani had gone to her off residence or to her residence, which was off the embassy. And he could tell from the diplomatic plates on the car that if that was a U.S. plated car. And the guy went up there and said, I know where Ramzi Yousef is. He's going to bomb 12 airplanes. He's doing this and he's doing that," and scared the hell out of this poor woman. So she called the embassy. The two DSS guys go out there, interview the guy, and fortunately, they conclude that this guy seems to be highly credible. So in Pakistan, everybody at the embassy, uh, with the perimeter, the security guards, all these people, they're all local hires, Pakistanis. So they put him in the back of their SUV and put a blanket over him and smuggle him into the embassy so they can start debriefing him. And this went on for 3, 4 days. And they're writing cables to Washington, to the FBI, the CIA, saying, we really think this Ramzi Yousef is going to be here. And he was supposed to arrive the following Saturday. Now, this is Wednesday. Saturday's not here yet. But yet, when I walk in there, they said, well, this is what's happened. And we thought he was going to be here in 2 days. And it turns out he got here last night. And he told our guy that he intends to go to Peshawar, take a bus to Peshawar, which is near the Afghan border, at 10 o'clock. So it's like, wait a minute, time out. We've got the world's most wanted terrorist in town, and he's going to leave in 90 minutes, and we got to go. Fine, let's do it. So my partner Cliff Bess and Jeff Reiner and Bill Miller are the two DSS agents. And we take our Foreign Service national investigators that are all DEA cleared, and they do investigations and all kinds of stuff for us.
Do you trust them?
We take them with them. They're absolutely trusted. And the RSO said that what he wanted to see happen was somebody would sit on the guest house where Ramzi Yousef was, and then somebody would, or all of us would follow him to the bus stop and continue to follow him once he gets on the bus or whatever until such time the local authorities arrive. So, well, I don't know. I haven't been there that long, but that doesn't sound very feasible to me. So I've never been to the bus station, but we'll go there and take a look. And Jeff and I drove over to the bus station, and there must have been 1 million people there. And in Pakistan, everybody, all males, with very few exception, wear what they call a shawal kameez. And that is like a pajama looking thing. They're usually white. They're long tails that they don't tuck in, baggy white pants to go with it. And they're wearing slippers or sandals of some sort. And everybody there, nobody had real long hair. I mean, everybody had hair like yours is, black hair over brown eyes, tan complexion, and everybody looks alike. And most of them have facial hair. I said, man, there's no way in the world we're ever going to identify this guy. If he, slips in with everybody else, who knows what bus he's going to get on and all that stuff. So,
right.
So I convinced Jeff that, we need to get the hell out of here and go back to the guest house. And I called my partner, Cliff, and said, are you thinking what I'm thinking? We got to hook this guy up. I mean, if he leaves the guest house before the cavalry arrives, we're never going to see this guy again. We'll just hook him up ourselves, and we'll take him to our counterpart, which was the anti-narcotic force, and shame them into doing something until we can, the dust settles, we can figure this thing out. And he said, "Oh, absolutely. We don't work for the State Department, and if we get PNG, persona non grata, out of there, so what? It's a feather on our hat, and we're the hell out of Pakistan." So there's all kinds of incentives to hook this guy up.
Greg, can I ask you how, as a DEA agent, how are you assigned to this rather than a different agency? Because he's involved with drugs?
We're it. Drugs had absolutely nothing to do with it. The fact is, we were the only federal law enforcement presence at the embassy.
Okay.
Other than the DSS, and the only thing they do enforcement wise is they investigate passport fraud and stuff like that, and that's it. So we were the criminal investigators of the embassy. And so it was natural for them to come to us to, ask for assistance.
Interesting. Okay.
So we told them, hey, look, I get it. You're a State Department employee, and your boss is adamant about don't put your hands on them. We're overseas, we can't arrest people. And all. I said, I get it, but all we ask is just keep people away from me and Cliff, because we're going to hook the guy up and we're going to take him, to the ANF. In the meantime, the U.S. ambassador had driven over to the Minister of the Interior and told him what was going on and pleaded with him to get somebody out there that could, take custody of this guy. So we had no idea what, if his efforts are going to pay off or not. So we were on the assumption that nobody was going to show. And sure enough, we got back to the guest house. You could see where he was. One of our investigators had went in there, and some BS story about, he's looking for somebody, found out what room he was in. And we realized that the guy was up the second floor and he's looking out the window at the street below. So we know he's there. And just about that time, here comes the cavalry. And the cavalry consisted of the Pakistani ISI, the intelligence or inter-service intelligence. They're kind of like a combination of military, counterintelligence and intelligence and the CIA all rolled into one. And they're not law enforcement, but these guys show up. There's must have been a dozen cars, two guys in each car, and they got AK-47s, and they have no idea where it is. They were put on the spot as much as we were, an hour earlier. So we met them at the door, told them where it was, and we all ran upstairs, and we had the key that we obtained for the registration clerk, and went up there, and one of the ISI guys put the key in the door, and I thought, man, oh man, he's got to have seen all the commotion going on in the street, and he might roll a hand grenade out towards us, or who knows what. So I'm around the corner, and I've got,
Yeah.
man, there's going to be shots fired, some damn thing going to happen. And they open the door and spring it open, and sure enough, there he is. That's the guy, and he's in civilian clothes. Rather, he's not wearing a schwal camise, and he's got no facial hair, so it was absolutely complete opposite of what I assumed. And it caught him just flat-footed. I mean, he had a pair of socks on, his pants, and the undershirt on. And of course, ISI don't carry handcuffs, so they revert to their training, which is they took his long sleeve dress shirt and tied his hands behind his back, and they took his knit sweater and put over his head and wrapped the the sleeves around him, and they whisked him out the door and
Damn.
down the stairs. And I'm thinking, well, where are we going? So I get in one of my SUVs with my FSN, and we take off, follow them, and we go through all through the residential areas of Islamabad.
And this is after the bombing, right? Obviously.
Oh, this is 2 years after the World Trade Center bombing.
Okay, yeah.
And there was a $2 million reward offered for him, and he was the hottest thing on the planet as far as go get this guy, because it had brought in a whole different realm of terrorism. It was a whole different breed now. Instead of attacking U.S. embassies or whatever overseas, now they're attacking us on our own turf,
Right.
New York City. So we follow him to this safe house, and we go in there, and he is now somebody found a pair of handcuffs with a long chain that was hooked to a radiator, and he's there in the corner, and he's got his hands handcuffed in front of him, and he's still got the sweater on. And about that time, the door opens up, and here comes a guy named Brad Garrett, and he's an FBI agent, and he In fact, he now is the law enforcement consultant for ABC News and has been for some time.
Oh,
And
wow.
I think this incident got him the job. This
Yeah.
is another one he did. But he walked in. He had absolutely no clue what was happening. Nobody briefed him on anything. He was flown there because he was going to do some follow up leads that he had, because he was investigating the Amir Khanzi case. They happened about the same time period. This Khanzi is another Pakistani national who had an AK-47, and he hid in the bushes outside Langley, where CIA headquarters was,
Yep.
and started shooting people as they were caught in the left turn lane to go into the compound. And he killed two and injured a whole bunch of others. And then he ended up fleeing, of course, go back to Pakistan. So Brad was a case agent on that, and he had come and go. We'd see him every 3-4 months. He'd show up to do some more follow up, and it just coincidentally he was there right after this event. So I was glad to see him, because that means he could, it's your case, not mine.
Right.
And so anyway, he walks in, and here I'm in a suit. He's wearing a New York Yankee baseball cap. He's got a sleeveless down jacket on, Levi's, and tennis shoes. I mean, he might as well had a sign over his head, so I'm an American. I mean,
Yeah.
it was obvious. So they start taking the sweater off Yousef, and it came up, and it came right about below his nose, and you could see he had this just evil, like a demented smile that reeked confidence. This guy thought, I'm not going to be here too long. I'm just going to say the magic words or grease the right palm or whatever it is to get out of here.
Right.
And when they took the sweater completely off him, he kind of started, he shook his head, blinked his eyes, and looked over and saw me and Brad. And he knew, oh shit, the Americans are here, and there's no way he's going to get out of this thing. And with his hands cuffed, he started shaking like this, and it started rattling the chains. I thought, man, this
Good.
guy, he knows he's toast. He's not going anywhere. So that was kind of interesting. And so I told Brad, why don't you stay here with him and do whatever you want to do? I'm going to go back to the embassy and get my camera and uh, evidence bags and stuff, go back to the guest house and see what the hell's in there. Who knows? So sure enough, there was all kinds of evidence of this thing called the Bojanka files. Bojanka is a Chechen term for the Big Bang. And Yousef had just come from the Philippines to Islamabad. And while he was in the Philippines, he was making a bomb with another guy, and they were going to blow up Bill Clinton on a presidential visit there. So he intended to assassinate him and the Pope, who was going to make another visit.
Wow.
And while he's, when you start making bombs, things happen. And sure enough, fire started, and the fire department was called, and it got out of hand. And his partner uh, stayed behind. Yousef fled, but he left his laptop there. The firemen take care of take care of the fire, and the police are there, and they're curious about what were these two Middle Eastern guys doing in Philippines. And they smelled a rat, and they looked at the computer, and they found this one MS file was Bojanka. That's where the name came from, and it laid the whole thing out what his plans were. And
Damn, what an idiot. He's like Hunter Biden leaving his laptops everywhere.
That's about right. I don't know if he assumed it was going to be consumed in the fire or whatever, but he was more interested in getting the hell out of there rather than be captured by the police. So it laid the whole thing out that his intent was recruit people who would put explosive devices on 12 U.S. airliners, and then rig them up with timing devices so that they would all explode at the same time over the Pacific Ocean.
Jeez.
I thought, Jesus Christ, So now here I am in the room where he was arrested. On the bed, are back in the day. If you went to the airport at the ticket counter, you could pick up a timetable, and it was every scheduled flight that the airline had. It was all in a tall, thin book, and you would know where you want to make a reservation from. And he had one from Delta, United, and American, and he had dog-eared certain pages where you could see those were flights that were going to go from, say, San Francisco to Singapore or wherever. And so he was identifying the planes that he wanted to target. Plus, there was a Time magazine that uh, told about how the FBI was trying to find him. So he would read that for his intel source as to where he stood.
Sure.
He had he had a briefcase had 9 um, Casio watches with the backs taken off and wires soldered onto the back of it. He had a one police car. It was a toy police car that was battery operated, and that was where he was going to stuff all the explosives in. There was a kind of cotton material. I I didn't have any idea what it was, but a bomb expert told me later that this particular kind of material was used to stabilize nitroglycerin. So that was going to be his source of the explosive, and then coupled with the ignition from the battery operated car. So I collected all that stuff. A couple days later, the FBI showed up. They're playing with the CIA, and everybody just really glad to get rid of this guy. I mean, the Pakistanis were thrilled to get rid of him as well. And before he left, Janet Reno wanted to make sure run his prints against the prints that INS had taken when he landed in New York without any passport or anything else. And sure enough, they matched, and off he went. And when I think they landed at Teterboro, something like that, in New Jersey, and took him by helicopter to New York. And when they were flying over the World Trade Centers, one of the agents said, "See, the Trade Center's still there." And he said, "Well, if I had $30,000 more, it wouldn't be."
Wow.
Jeez. So,
Damn.
man, yeah. So anyway, I ended up testifying in the Southern District of New York on that case. He was tried a couple times for World Trade Center itself, and then the Bojanka incident. And the U.S. attorney there brought to our attention that if you did the math and the capacity of each of the 747s that he was targeting times 12 would go into like 3,300 deaths if that was
Yeah.
if he pulled it off. So we were just more than happy to get rid of this guy. And during the trial, he he knew he was history. There was no way he was going to get out of this thing. So he elected to defend himself, and
Smart.
he had a legal advisor. So he had a fool for a client, for starters,
Yeah.
and he acted as his own defense, and he would ask questions of me as a witness. And the judge said beforehand that you address him in the third person. So yes, Mr. Yousef did this, Mr. Yousef did that. It's just kind of like, okay, I
Right.
kind of get it. And then during my testimony, it was all bullshit questions. 45 minutes of, well, what about this and what about? I mean,
Yeah.
it led to nothing. And he spoke perfect English, and he had gone. He got a master's in electrical engineering in England, so he spoke perfect English. And so one of the times he said, "Well, where was Mr. Yousef at the time you entered the room?" I said, "Well, you're looking out the window at the street below." And the Judge Duffy perks up, and he slides his chair over the witness stand, and he says, "Agent, am I going to have to remind you again to address him in
Oh
the
my
third
gosh.
person?" I said,
Technicalities.
"No, sir, don't worry about it. Everything's." And you could tell the jurors. I mean, there was one big big guy in the first row, and he had like uh, the Marine symbols tattooed on his forearms, and he's sitting there like this. He's going,
Yeah. See you
"I'm gonna
later.
fucking beat this guy."
Yeah. Man, Greg, let me ask
Man,
you
gee.
the day at like the night when you got to go home or whenever you got to go home after you took part in capturing this guy, was that surreal for you? Like to sit down and be like, oh my
Like,
gosh, I was part of capturing this
yeah,
terrorist.
I don't mind. Who would it? Who knew? Least of all me. And we were relieved that everything had gone well. He's in custody. Uh, FBI's on their way. Uh, it was a big relief because once you realize the enormity of it all,
Mm,
what the potential could have been, and not to mention the guest house was 3 blocks from my residence, so it all kind of put it in perspective.
that's
Yeah.
crazy, man. What a cool story. Um, Greg, can we take it way back to a young officer or special agent Lee? The first call that you had when you really got your blood going or you had an adrenaline dump.
Well, that was my first one.
Yeah.
Gee, it would probably have to be when I was an explorer. Uh, there was a call came out of shots fired. It was a drive-by shooting thing, and we arrived. I think we were the first unit there, and there's this guy lying in his front lawn, and he's dead. Here I am,
Wow.
17 years
As an
old.
explorer.
Here I am. I'm looking like, oh shit, and so they're trying to get witness information, description of the vehicle, all that sort of stuff. And then later on, the LA County Sheriff's homicide detectives came out, and I watching them like, wow. I mean, these guys are the real deal. I mean, they're
Yeah.
really pumping this guy good for witnesses, motivation, all that sort of stuff. It was a gang related type thing. So, but going there, it was like, oh shit, shots fired, what, and you get there, and then you realize that the crooks are gone, fortunately, and then you do what you got to do after that. So that was pretty
Yeah.
interesting. A lot of experience was gained.
I bet. How did it infect you? Did it make you like? Were you pumped up? Were you interested, or were you like, oh my gosh, this is nuts?
No, I took it for what it is, and it's like, hey, I get it. It didn't deter me at all.
Mm,
In fact, if anything, it just motivated me more to get in the business. Being a LA kind of guy, I was considering maybe movie or TV production, or something along those lines. I enjoyed that too,
mm,
and but I got hooked. They put the hook in me, and this is what I wanted to do because it was just so interesting. It's so unpredictable. They say, patrol especially, it's 95% boredom and 5% sheer terror. And
yeah.
that really about sums it up.
Yeah. Absolutely. I can attest to that. Where you're like, you can have shifts in a row where you're like, man, this is not much going on, and then it's always I have to say it's always when you're about to get off your shift, and then
Oh, invariably.
and you're exhausted, and something happens, and you're like,
Yeah, like
you,
I'm going to in Pasadena. I'm going to the station, and right. I mean, I'm a block from the station, ready to end the watch, and the guy, a drunk driver, runs a red light in front of me. So I pull him over, and sure enough, he's DUI. And we had just before shift at the briefing, the watch commander was saying about how they're real tight on overtime. We, avoid overtime at all.
right,
And here
always.
I am. And so I arrested the guy and took him to the station. He said, "Well, didn't you hear about the overtime?" I said, "Well, what do you want me to do? Let him go or give him a ride home?" Or I mean, I said, "No, this guy had to go." So
Right.
anyway, just
Yeah, they
well,
don't want you to give them a ride home. They
no,
want
hell
you
no.
They want you to do the job for free.
Yeah, well, that's about what amounts to. Yeah.
That's too funny.
Yeah.
Greg, can you describe a strange or bizarre thing you've dealt with?
Okay. I think of it again in Pakistan. There's no end to strange and bizarre things there. Uh, like I said, the first 6 months was really good. It was different and not a lot of heavy lifting. And then one day I'm in my office and we hear this explosion, which was about 2 blocks from the embassy, and the aftershock knocked the screens off the windows.
Wow.
The place I'm in. So I go,
Yeah.
hey, yikes. So this is after Ramzi Yousef. After Yousef got hooked up, the FBI decided that, well, maybe we ought to have a legat there, a full-time FBI presence there. Yeah, you think? I think so.
Yeah.
So we've got this FBI agent there, and so I run to see him and say, hey, let's find out what the hell happened. So he and I walked the 2 blocks, and it's the Egyptian embassy. There was 2 suicide bombers. One guy pulls in with his car up to the entryway, blows it up, creates a big hole in the wall. Another car follows in behind him, goes into the center of the compound, blows it up. And oh man, and so there's got to be like a 15-foot crater created by this other car bomb.
Wow.
And there's empty parts all over the place, and the whole place is riddled with shrapnel stuff and everything on it. And the Pakistani police show up in a flatbed truck, and they start taking casualties that are lying around. And I mean, 2 guys, one grabbed by the wrist, the other by the ankles, and they're swinging them to throw them up onto the flatbed truck. And then there's a bulldozer coming, and the bulldozer fills the hole up. That had all the evidence, everything you need is in there, and they cover it up. And they're taking more of these people, and they throw another body up, and the next thing you know, you would hear a groan or a moan or like, you don't even know these people are dead or not. And
Right.
and the FBI agent and I are sitting there, and we're going to the police like, what in the hell are you doing? And they go, well, Benazir Bhutto, who's the prime minister, she's coming to see what happened, and we want to tidy it up for her. Well, that's the extent of the training and experience of the illustrious Pakistani police.
Damn.
They don't have a clue. And so, anyway, that thing did get solved. It turned out to be a Canadian national who was a Pakistani with a Canadian citizenship. And he had a hard-on for the Egyptians. I forget what exactly, but it's like, you got to be kidding.
You think investigating 101, secure the scene, right?
So, well, the prime minister's coming. You can't. Well, then keep her away. How's that sound? But yeah. No. But I mean, it's just bizarre. I tell you a whole bunch of bizarre things, and that's where you're going to find them is in Pakistan.
It's crazy. It's like you're constantly at, like, as we call in the police world, an away game. Like when a neighboring community calls you, you go in and you help to the extent that you can. And it's great. We call it an away game because we don't have to do any paperwork. We're there to help, muckle the guy, whatever you need to do. You go back to your municipality and you're good. So you're constantly in this away game where it's like you're beholden to these local authorities and you have to watch them not know what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, I've seen it in Pasadena where there's some major disturbance going on somewhere and they call for mutual aid, and you got all these different agencies around that all respond, and everybody's driving a black and white, and everybody wears a dark blue LAPD type uniform.
Mm-hmm.
And when the name tags start coming off, you better there's going to be some serious ass kicking going on, because you get in your car and go back to where you came from,
Yeah.
because you're not the one responsible for the paperwork or anything else.
Yeah. Hell yeah. That's funny. Greg, can you tell us about your most intense or terrifying experience as a special agent or police officer?
Well, besides the Yousef thing, it was pretty terrifying being up there when they're opening the door.
Oh, I'm sure.
You don't know what to expect. But when I was a Pasadena policeman, I had a ride along, and she was like a 25-year-old woman, excuse me, and I'm in an area of Pasadena where there was a liquor store that all the bums would hang out there, and they, go buy their liquor or steal it, and then they go in the parking lot next to it and drink it all day, that type of thing.
Sure.
So the community was fed up with that crap, and so I made it a point to go over there every opportunity. So one night, sure enough, here's this guy drinking, in public. He's drunk. So I tell him, well, guess what? You're under arrest. Put your hands behind your back. And instead of doing that, of course, he wants to fight. The fight's on. So I've got this guy. His back is against me, and he's pushing me against a chain link fence. And we're kind of like a stalemate. I can't get him off, and he can't get me off of him. So I tell the ride along, get my radio, tell him an officer needs help, and where we are, Lincoln and forget. So she gets on the radio, and boy, that gets the attention of the dispatch.
Yeah, I bet.
Like, oh shit, the ride along is calling for help for the officer. So it was nice to hear, here comes the cavalry, because you can hear the sirens coming from all over the place.
Sure.
Everybody rolls on that. So I'm hanging on to this guy until the first officer shows up. And then I figure what I'm going to do is push this guy off of me towards him. And then the two of us can pretty much take care of business. Well, as soon as he shows up, I push the guy off, and he immediately spins around and with both hands grabs the handle of my revolver and pulls it out of my Bianchi holster.
Oh.
And then he turns around and points the gun right at me.
Oh my
and
gosh.
I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, So the whole situation's changed now. So I, fortunately, you revert to your training, and we'd gone through drills like this in the Army, actually, at CID school, where the revolver was the prevalent firearm at the time.
Sure.
And I grabbed the barrel and held on to the cylinder. And if you hold on to the cylinder, it's not, no matter how hard you squeeze, it's not going to rotate the cylinder. So I'm hanging on to that. In the meantime, here come some more officers. They all jump on the guy. The guy falls over. He's got the gun in his hand still. And I've got a 2-inch Smith & Wesson on my ankle. And I had seriously considered screwing in his head and blow his brains out, because we could not get the gun away from him. And then I thought, all this is going through your mind, and I'm thinking, they're going to armchair quarterback me forever if I do that. So one of the officers was grabbing onto the gun, and he was a weightlifter type of guy, and he finally got the gun away from him.
Damn.
And boy, what a relief. And then so we take the station, book them, and I'm like, man, oh man. I mean, that was
That'll make you think.
And I remember in court later, we had a preliminary hearing for the felony. In California, you have a prelim. Nobody gets indicted. It's a rarity. So you just have a prelim. And I remember when I got done testifying, the judge looked at me and he says, what were you thinking when all this was happening? I said, I thought I was going to die.
Yeah.
Simple as that. And so he held him over, and the detectives talked to him, and everybody was convinced that this guy said he didn't have any recollection of what happened, and I believe him. This guy was just so
Gone.
he probably blew a 3.8 or something like that if you did, and he had no recollection of what in the world happened. And I have a tendency to believe him.
Damn,
That's
man.
pretty terrifying, because at the time too, there was some studies that showed that something like maybe 10 or more percent of officer shootings were from their own weapon,
Yeah.
which is pretty terrifying. So the next day, LAPD at the time was using what they call a clamshell holster. You
Yeah.
familiar with it?
Yep. Yeah, they still carry them. They give them the choice. They can still carry those if they want.
Well, apparently Pasadena had used them at one time, and then for whatever reason, the chief got rid of them. But everybody still had theirs. I never had one. But the next day after this incident, the chief said you can put your clamshell on, and everybody put their clamshell back on their holster, on their belt. And I ran down and bought one immediately. And I'm telling you, that's the best holster I think I've seen. And good luck getting a gun out, unless you know where to go and where to punch it. You
Yeah.
know, it's spring loads open. It's just like the name implies. There's a clamshell, and then it springs open, and that gun's right in your hand. I mean, I really like the thing.
Yeah. When I was at LAPD, I was really shocked at the preference they give to officers. They let them carry any holster they want, and they have a choice of like 3 or 4 handguns from Glock to Smith to whatever else. And a lot of the old timers still carried the hinge, like like it's kind of a drop leg on a hinge, like it just
Yeah.
like a single snap out, like just very no retention at all. Like basically, if you could unsnap the leather, you could get that. And I remember seeing like lieutenants and stuff with, of course, they were older. They had probably had it their whole career, and that's what they wanted to stick with. And they had the hinge holster with just the leather snap. And I just remember thinking like these guys must never get in the shit. You know what I mean? Because they have these swing holsters with the leather snap what you could just easily grab. And most of the younger patrol had the multi-stage retentions, where it would take a couple snaps or a rock backwards or something to prevent the gun being taken out. But I was just, because when you come from a small agency in the Northeast and you go to LAPD and you see these guys, you figure, well, these guys are like trendsetters. They're like the cutting edge, and you figure they're just going to have all the bells and whistles and all the, whatever. But no, I'm not going to poo-poo it or not. It's nice to give your officers preference to what they want. But I was kind of shocked that like these guys that like routinely go to riots and all kinds of other stuff could have just a single snap retention leather holster. I was like, damn, that seems...
At the time too, when LAPD's using the clamshell holster, the sheriff's office made fun of them, said, that's sissy stuff or whatever. I don't know what their issue was, but they didn't want anything to do with it.
Yeah.
So,
it's so weird. Like the Mass State Police, who are it's a very squared away organization in Massachusetts. They're very militant. Their academy's insane. These guys are very, very squared away. The state troopers in Mass, forever until recently, had the single snap leather holster. When all the municipalities, we all had triple retention, or at least double. But the Mass State Police always had the single snap. And I swear it's because it looks nicer. It's a slimmer profile. It looks good in the uniform. Because they do the Sam Brown cross straps and the big boots. And it just doesn't, it just doesn't look nice to have a big honker on your hip with all these retentions. It looks nicer to have the single retention holster because it's more traditional. And
when I went to DEA, when I went to training, they issued you a Smith & Wesson stainless steel revolver, 4-inch. And I thought, whatever. But that was the gun you had to qualify with. And then once you got to your field division, the policy was if you qualified with it, you could carry anything from a 380 up to a 44 Magnum.
right.
It was up to you. I mean, now think of all the guns and the calibers and all that in between that spread.
Yeah.
And we'd go to the range in LA, and man, I wouldn't want to be the Army because you've got to, order and keep, every caliber. Oh my God,
Yeah.
there was no standard whatsoever. And also if you got in a situation where you're out of bullets and you're carrying a 380 Walther, and then your partner's got a 9mm SIG, he can't help you.
Yeah.
He can't give you any more ammunition than you've already got. So it was really kind of a culture shock of the lacks of officer safety or agent safety I saw at the beginning of DEA. I remember we went to a like a 20-story apartment building and went to arrest somebody, and then the case agent said we had like 3 people in there to arrest, and the case agents, they hook one guy up and they say, oh, okay, and so I hook another guy up, and then they look at the other agent and said, well, hook him up. You go, you don't have any handcuffs. What? What? Are you kidding? So I ran back to my car. I had my go to war bag in there, and I had 4 or 5 sets of handcuffs, all kinds of bullets, and all sorts of stuff. And so I run back up and we hook him up too. It's like, God Almighty, just.
It's funny.
But the attitude then was, well, I'm a federal narcotics agent. I'm bulletproof. I can do anything. The hell you can. I mean, you kidding? You die as quick as anybody else around here.
Yeah, I've said in this podcast before, we get the magazines, the national magazines for law enforcement, and a lot of the fallen officers in the back of those magazines are DEA agents. Like, it's pretty heavy with DEA guys.
We had, during my 20 years, we had, I think, 22 agents killed.
Yeah.
In a variety of ways. And so I thought, man, this is just, well, they're not bulletproof, believe me.
You'll appreciate this, Greg. We had the DEA come to town, and there was a warrant for a local guy who had sold bad heroin, and evidently it was knowingly. So he was killing people. So the DEA came down, and we met at the border of these 2 towns, and we were all going to meet my town, the other town, and the DEA guys, and we're going to go over. And the DEA guys were like, they pulled up in their unmarked Explorers, and for me it was cool because I didn't deal with federal agents a lot, so it's like, oh, this is cool, the DEA guys are here. And they were like, hey, we were chatting, they're really nice guys, and one of the DEA guys was like, ooh, I don't have my vest. And the other DEA guy was like, oh, I forgot my vest too. And then they're like, screw it. They just had guns on and badges, and to us, like, it was like, hey man, like we're loaded up. We got our vests on, all of our gear, and we're ready to go. And the DEA guys were like, we'll do it anyways. I never forgot that.
Yeah, we're bulletproof. See, federal narcotic agents. What do you expect?
And I mean, and in this case, the kid was kind of a cream puff. He was, crying by the time he was in handcuffs. But I always thought, like, man, they should be more careful. These guys they do this stuff all the time, And they're probably just, like they say with firearms instructors, the most, like, I'm a firearms instructor, and the guys that have a lot of discharges are firearms instructors because of complacency. You just do it a lot, so you're handling guns a lot, and you end up shooting yourself in the leg or whatever. Same with these guys. They're doing raids all the time, so if they show up to a raid and they don't have their vest, they're like, well, we're not going to hold everybody up. We're still going to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, yeah, I remember I remember my oral interview for DEA, the assistant special agent in charge was asking questions, and he said, "Oh, Pasadena. Yeah, well, how many shootings have you been involved in Pasadena?" I said, "None." I said, "When you think about it, all the officer contacts with citizens through patrol or what have you, we have one shooting where these police were staking out an ATM for a robber, and the guy, sure enough, robbed somebody, and they were right there, and the guy had a gun, and it blew him up. But that was the only shooting in 2.5 years I was there, and so I understand now why they asked that question. Now I came real close to shooting a woman who pulled a like 24-inch shears out of her purse and was trying to stab my partner. I damn near shot her. I mean, to the point where I had to turn the cylinder to click it back in place because that's how close I came.
You're like half a trigger pull.
And then then I get to LA, and we had a shooting a quarter. Sometimes we'd have two. I mean, we were shooting people like it was going out of style.
Yeah.
And if you couldn't shoot them, we'd run them over with cars.
Yeah.
Whatever it took, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And we had an incident once where agents buying dope from this guy in like a Safeway big parking lot, and we're ready for the high sign, so we know when to arrest him. And I could see that the guy's backup lights came on. Ooh, that's not good. So the car's running. He's got it in gear, and next thing you know, the guy takes off and runs around and crashes, gets out of the car and runs somewhere. And so I'm in my car and I'm driving where I can anticipate where he's going catty corner through this gas station. So I go ahead of him thinking he's going to come around the corner. I'm just going to run into him, let him fly over the hood of the car. And when I get there, he's not there. What the hell happened? So I get out of the car and realize that some other agents had caught up to him. And what happened is when he was running, he pulled a little Beretta 22 auto out and pointed it at the agent that was chasing him. And the agent happened to be our firearms range guy. And he had a big old 45 Colt, and he shot at the guy and missed him. I think he might have killed a car, block away.
Yeah.
I don't know why. But anyway, what happened is the time he fired, that bullet was going over the hood of my car. So now I thought, Jesus. So we grabbed this guy and took his pants off and grabbed by the ankles and shook him for any other weapons he had.
Yeah.
That was pretty terrifying. Like, God almighty, Here I thought I'll be the guy who makes the tackle with the car. And instead, I get shot at by my own guy who didn't see me. Like, geez. So every plan's fine until it isn't. And
Yeah.
The minute you have this, wonderful plan made, that's when it all turns to crap.
That's the rule, my man. That's the way it goes down. Greg, I've had you here almost an hour. I got one more question for you. It's a really popular question on the show. It's for people looking to get into law enforcement. They're looking at local, state, federal. What advice would someone with your experience give to them getting into the field?
Well, the first thing is you got to maintain a stellar background. I mean, don't smoke dope. Don't,
Yes.
don't get a history of a whole bunch of parking and speeding tickets and all that, because that's all indicative of your character.
Yep.
Have a good credit score. Have stellar credit. Don't be behind because you didn't pay your bills or whatever it is, because they're going to look at your credit check to see. And all that is indicative of the personality of the person that they're considering to hire. So you got to just do what everybody is supposed to do, and that's obey the law and keep your pay your bills, stuff like that.
Yep.
And then when if you have any intention of going federal, uh, at a minimum you have to have a bachelor's degree. It's as simple as that. And I've heard guys say, "Well, I'm so experienced. I've had 10 years working narcotics in Boston and all that." So why? It doesn't make any difference, because the type of cases you do and the people you're dealing with and all is going to require that you have some form of higher education.
Yeah.
And if you get a master's, all the better. But that's the minimum walking in the door. So, I suggest you stay in school. If you're a police officer and you're deciding you'd like to maybe be a Fed someday, go to night school. Go, until you can finish your bachelor's degree. It's going to benefit you as a person.
Yeah.
It's going to enhance your quality of life, and it gives you a lot more doors that open up too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great advice. I mean, I see it on the level I'm at where, you to be a cop, really the requirement for most agencies is a high school diploma, which is okay. But where I work, I will take on more complex investigations. So, and I'm not tooting my own horn, but I have a college degree and I'm pretty good at writing. I'm good at writing reports, and it's important. So there's a lot of cops out there, and they think their reports they're writing are fine. But when you're a supervisor, you see everybody's reports and you read them. And even where I used to work, I had some supervisors that would ask me to read their reports. They'd say, "Hey, which is not a bad idea if you're working on a shift with only 2 or 3 guys. Hey, it's going to go to court, so why not have someone else read it?" So my hat's off to those supervisors that didn't have an ego, and they said, "Hey, would you read my report?" Well, there's a lot of bad report writing in police work. Let me just say it that way. I'm not going to name any names, but they're especially, and these are street level reports. So if you're gonna do complex investigations, which is required at the federal level, and to a lesser and to the same degree actually at the local level, depending. Hopefully you have a detective unit. If you don't, then it's going to fall on patrol or supervisors. It makes a big difference. So if the reports don't read well, and they're not they're hard to follow, and there's grammatical stuff like that, makes a difference.
It's all a reflection on the writer, on the author.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Sure.
the defense attorneys now too. Like I've been on the stand recently where, they Google you, they want to know about you, even for like an OUI, or we call them OUI Massachusetts, or DUI other places. I had an experience recently where I left the courtroom and the defense attorney said, "Hey, I want to tell you did a good job," and I've never had a defense attorney say that to me, and I said, "I did a good job."
Be wary.
I said, "Why are you saying that?" I said, "Well, thank you." And he said, "Well, I know that because I've been listening to your podcast." And I said, "Damn, really?" He goes, "Yeah, I've been listening to it. And actually the whole office has been listening to it." And it kind of like sent shivers down my spine. I was like, okay, so and he was a younger guy, like in his 30s. And I said, okay, so these defense attorneys, he was looking at my social media and my podcast for something about my character, something I said, something that he could use. But in the short, after doing it, he said, we enjoyed the podcast. So he was a fan. Like, he liked it, which was like the optimal outcome. Then a worse outcome would be he listened to an episode where I was more political, or, who knows what I've said on this podcast, where they don't mind picking something and tearing it apart. So I say all that to say, like, not only will they go after your social media, but they look at your report intensely because they know if they see your report, they might get an idea of what kind of, how you'll handle like a cross-examination, and they'll go after that. They'll try to exploit that, of course, because they're being paid a lot of money to defend somebody, and their whole goal is to win. So again, all that to say, I totally understand what you're saying. When you're doing complex investigations, they're gonna want to know. They're gonna want, at minimum, a writing sample, and they're gonna want to know you have some form of higher education, and you've been instructed in some way to write a coherent report.
Yeah, just don't exaggerate whatever you do, because you'll never hear the end of it to get caught.
Right. My big thing is I'm always tired, I feel like, and when I write an arrest report, I'll omit something. And then once you omit something, you can't testify to it because it's not in your report. So they love that when you omit something, and then they can come back and say, well, why didn't you put this in your report, or this, that, or the other thing? And and honestly, it has never really affected the outcome of the case, but it, as you know, it doesn't feel good when the jury's looking at you and you're like, trying to explain yourself.
Yeah.
It's no good.
Show confidence. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Such a pleasure to have you, Gary. Sorry, Gregory. My bad. Your book. Now, you've written 3 textbooks, which sounds boring, but you're dipping your toes into something a little bit different now. You're writing novels. So I want to hear about Stinger in international thriller and what that's all about.
Well, Stinger, when I wrote it, I was thinking, as a DEA agent, you're always up to the challenge. I need to get from here to there, but I have obstacles in front of me to do that. So how do I get around it? So this is one of those how to get around it situations for the CIA. They want to get their hands on a Stinger missile to use in the assassination of Saddam Hussein. But there's this pesky presidential directive that says that the CIA can't kill heads of state. So their intention is to kill Saddam to avoid a full-fledged invasion of the country to look for weapons of mass destruction. They figure if they whack him, get him out of the way, there's no need to invade the country. That they'll just take it upon themselves to get new leadership there. But they can't just go to the army and say, hey, we're the CIA and we need this, the Stinger, because that's all. They can't do that. So they have to find some way of plausible deniability. So they come up with, they kidnap the mother and sister of a DEA informant who lives in Los Angeles. And the sister and mother are in Lebanon. And the informant is a Lebanese American. So the CIA agent, who's a female, June Cohen, goes to his house, identifies herself as CIA, and says, hey, I know you're working for the DEA, and your parent, your mother and sister have been kidnapped, and we will rescue them if you assist us. And we want you to tell your DEA handler, the agent, that you've got a guy who wants to buy a Stinger missile. And then we think he's probably on the ball enough that he'll run with the case. And then we'll see what happens after that. So it's kind of convoluted. There's a lot of stuff that I think if you're in the business or anything close to it, or if you just like thrillers, I mean, there's a lot of everything you can imagine thrown in here. And so it's got DEA, FBI, CIA, CID, you name it, and it's definitely international in the way it works. And I think you'd enjoy it. Anybody in the business would enjoy it. Anybody who's got any intelligence
Sounds awesome.
or police background would enjoy it. If you go to my website, you can see the description or the blurb on the back of the book. It doesn't give too much away, but it gives you, I think it just sinks that hook that you'll probably be real interested in reading how it turns out.
Sounds awesome. And it's available on Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, and BlackRoseWriting.com. Can they get to it? They obviously can get to it through GregoryDlee.com as well.
I'm not selling them. My publisher is in charge of that. But if you go to my website, you'll see the cover of the book on it, and you just click on it. It'll take you right to the Amazon page for the book. And if by chance you were to buy it and read it and enjoyed it, I would encourage you to please leave a review, an honest review, on the Amazon page, and follow me on there as well. And that way you'll be first to know if there's anything else down the road.
Hell yeah. And a lot of listeners actually do purchase the books from guests, and they love them. So I encourage everybody to do that. Greg, I am so sorry I called you Gary. I don't know why that happened, my man. I think I'm flipping through screens, and I'm
okay,
like,
John. No problem, John.
Now we're even. Gregory D. Lee, sir, it was an absolute honor to have you. Fantastic stories, fascinating. Everybody should go get your book. And can you hold on just like 2 or 3 minutes when I do the outro?
Sure.
All right. The great Gregory Lee, everybody. Fantastic stories. Just fascinating to hear him talk about it. An honor to have him on. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. This is the time in the show where we thank the Patreon sergeants, who I'm talking about. Oh, boy. Oh, my buttons are screwed up. Hold on. Stand by. There we go. Don't know how that happened. What I'm talking about is the J.A. family. Jessica King, Jason Labrie, everybody. The great Bentley Barnett. Zachary Pleat. The great Sheriff Ronald Long. Ossifer Andy. Adam McMahon, everybody. Clark LeCuff. The great Nancy Hammond. Zach Haney, everyone. Brad Thompson, Kyle Roberts, the great Jace Crow, Christian, ladies and gentlemen, the great Elliot Sykes, Dave Ellman, the great Richard Tolles. Keep on trucking, brother. Stay safe out there. Doug and Kelly Newman, love you guys. See you at church. Dan Carlson from Burley Boards, great woodwork. Check him out on Instagram. Scott Young, everyone, the great Thomas Connell, Dennis Scaris, Dio, everyone. George Tessier, the great Iceman from Motor Cop Chronicles, Greg Gadboy, Ben Peters, the great Scott Minkler, Tammy Walsh holding it down at dispatch, Sean Clifford, the great Sasha McNabb, Jason Lau, the great Lauren Stimson, everybody, Jake Pinito, John Shoemaker, James Rose, Seth Wright, the great Tony Fahey, William James Long, that's Deputy William James Long to you, thank you very much. The great and powerful Andy Biggs, Chris June, everyone, Adam Mihal, the great Gary Steiner, and the handsome Lane Campbell. Woo, it's a mouthful, guys, but I'm happy to do it. The Patreon Sergeants. If you really love the show and you want to show your support, go to the link in the show notes, go to the Patreon and join up there. If not, no worries at all. The show will remain free. All I ask is that you give a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform, preferably Apple, but Spotify is good too. I love you guys, and I'll see you next time.